Welcome to this session.
This talk addresses common challenges in test automation for global projects, offering practical solutions to issues like flaky tests, layout changes, and hardware dependencies, with the aim of improving efficiency and reducing maintenance overhead. Our next speaker brings over 15 years of experience across various tech domains, from industrial automation to autonomous mobile robots. A frequent international speaker and a Best Presentation Award winner, he's here to share his expertise in test automation. Please give a warm welcome to the Senior QA Automation Engineer at Indeed, Mr. Masoud Darukal.
All right, I think we can get started. So, hello everyone. I hope you can see my screen. And yes, I think we are ready. Cool. So, good morning. I'm not very far away from the Philippines, but I'm locating in Japan. So, it's also morning for me. I think I'm 1 hour ahead of you, but we are kind of in the same time zone. So, my name is Mesut Durukal, and I'm a test automation engineer. And in the session, I will talk about some difficulties or challenges that we can encounter while developing our test code and the test automation framework. Ohayou gozaimasu. And you can see some socials on this slide. So please feel free to reach out to me. I'm very open for feedback, or if you have any questions, please reach out. I think we will have a Q&A session at the end of the talk, but still, if you have something else to ask about anything related to test automation, QA engineering, quality development, so I'm very open for that. And nowadays, I'm organizing a test software testing conference in Japan, which is the Tokyo Test Fest. And if you are interested, you can check it out that too. So let's get started. So we will talk about the difficulties, right? But first of all, why are we talking about the automation itself? Why is it very important? Because nowadays, if we don't do the automation and if we try to execute all our test scenarios, all our specification verifications manually, it will be super cumbersome, right? It will be very time consuming, and not only time, but we need time, effort, and headcount and several resources. It's basically not very feasible. We don't have too many people to allocate to manual testing, and we don't have that much time. So, most of the time, sometimes it might be the other way around, but most of the time, automated tests are way faster than the manual testing activities. So, this is one advantage. But not only saving from time, but also the uh, improving the coverage perspective, we can utilize the automated test cases. Because let's think about it. If I automate or implement a test scenario, I can feed this test case with several different test data, right? I can prepare a test data pool and I can follow kind of data driven testing. So, which would be other again similarly, if I tried to do that manually, it would be super difficult. I would try to execute the same test cases by just changing different parameters or the test inputs. But if I have the automation, then I can just let it run on the pipelines by just changing the test inputs. For automation, computers, machines don't get tired, right? They are not as us as human beings. So If we have the automation, then we can run them a lot of times. So it saves time, it improves coverage, it eliminates the human effort, and sometimes we can perform some things that we cannot do with the human efforts, the manual efforts. So this is the bright side. But of course, there is the other side of the medallion too, right? So let's discuss about that. Automation is great, but there are several different challenges we have to cope with. So, what are those challenges? Let's discuss them one by one. So, I'll try to go over the difficulties or the challenges in different categories. Some of the difficulties will stem from the test itself. Like if we try to implement the test case, sometimes it is not very straightforward, especially if we are trying to do the UI testing. Sometimes finding the elements, components, or just building some locator selectors, they are not very straightforward. Or it's not only UI testing, but API testing, different challenges. And sometimes we have some challenges from the product perspective. Like maybe the system that we are testing is not a very simple product, but it is a complex and complicated. So there are different challenges from different perspectives. But first, I will start from the working environment that we are in together with different colleagues or different teams. Most of you know this comics, right, on the slide. So what we see here is business team has an understanding of the product. Development team has another understanding. Maybe there are some misalignments. And did you realize the left bottom corner? It is a documentation. Most of the time, there is no documentation, right? So as QA engineers, as testers, we need documentation because I am executing my test scenario and I need to know what is the expected result. This is how I can conduct my test cases. I have an actual result and I have to compare this with the expected result. But what is the expected result? Yeah, this is a very classic picture, right? So most of the people know it. But it is true practically. We all see it because, again, when I'm trying to see the expected results, I have to refer to the documents which does not exist. So here, the challenge is even though we sync with the development team, we can automate the relevant scenarios, but that's not all. We are not done because we have frequent updates and changes, right? Because we are working in agile. If we say that we are agile, then we cannot refuse the changes. We should accept them. And it means even though we automated one test case, we should continuously maintain and continuously update, keep our test cases up to date. So this is the challenge. And how can we cope with this challenge? Of course, we need a close relationship with the development teams, right? As QA teams, if we are isolated, if we have silos between the teams, then again, we will have some misalignments. Maybe the development team will change the functionalities, but if we are not aware of what is being done, then our test cases will be outdated, right? So the first challenge was keeping with the frequent updates or changes, and the proposal here would be building a close and continuous relationship with and the communication with the development team. It's not only development team but also the product team, the product owners, the product managers, so that we can understand what is being expected by the end users, by the customers, clients. So in this way, we can keep ourselves as the QA teams, QA people up to date, and we can uh, continuously maintain our test cases. So the very first one was the communication skills from a QA perspective. Let's move on. This time, not the working environment that I mean the task management environment, but also the environment where we are executing our test cases, basically the test environment. What kind of challenges we can have? We might have some different responses for the same query. Like I'm running a test case by sending a query and I'm having a response, right? So I can insert some assertions to check if the response that I'm getting is correct or not. Okay, this is cool. So I edit my assertion and I let my test case run a lot of times. But after some time, I realized that there are some different responses. What's going on? Maybe there is an A/B testing activities, right? Let me put some quick notes in the chat so that it might be easier to follow. So, what is A/B testing? Like, there are different versions deployed in the testing environment just to get some feedback on different versions, right? So, this might be one uh, reason, and of course there can be several other reasons too, like intermittent issues, yes, exactly, or like maybe there is a canary deployment, so a specific version is deployed, but another portion of another version is also in production, so we don't know which version we will hit in our execution, so we can get some different responses. So the key here is sometimes if we have different responses from the environment that we are running our test cases, then our test cases should be capable of managing all these. Maybe we can restrict all the responses that we can get by setting the configuration. So this can be called as feature management. Like if we know that there are different versions, and if we don't want to deal with lots of several other versions of responses, then we can limit the features that we want to test. So we all know what we expect in advance. So this is kind of configuring our test environment. So yeah, the you know why the canary is there, right? Because it stands for the canary deployment. And I'm not sure if you know the story, but in the ancient times, when they were exploring if there's a poisonous gas inside caves, people were sending some canaries. And if they go back, then it means the cave is safe. There's no poisonous gas. I think it is not very good in terms of the animal rights, but this is how they do in the ancient times. So this is where the story is coming from. But yeah, so the key point here is the second key point now we are discussing is prepare your environment and uh, please do not expect too many surprises. If you have a lot of inconsistencies, a lot of instabilities, then it will be super difficult to manage. So prepare everything in advance and prepare your environment. Let's move on. So we discussed some challenges stemming from the environments, right? Let's a little bit talk about challenges stemming from the product itself. What kind of challenges we can have stemming from the product that we are testing, the system under test, right? It might be some maybe complex or complicated products because it is not always very straightforward. So we have to verify or validate several interfaces, several other integrations from the product. And sometimes we have some testability issues. What does a testability issue mean? If we have something which is not easy to test, which is a little bit difficult to test, then it means we have some testability issues. So the title of my presentation is dealing with challenges or the test hassles with real life examples, right? So this is what I promised, and I will give some real life examples. For example, on that regard, one real life example is the expiry dates. Like if we have some tokens, secrets, which are supposed to expire after some time, how can I test this? Like, let's suppose it is 14 days, 2 weeks. How can I automate this test case? Should I just start to create the token and wait for 2 weeks? It doesn't make sense, right? It's not feasible. So, what I can do is again, just for testing purposes, I can reduce the expiry duration. Maybe not 2 weeks, but 2 minutes, just to see after that expiry date. Because in terms of coding, it is just a variable. I can set the value or change the value. So either 2 weeks or 2 minutes after the expiry date, the token should not be valid anymore. So this is the functionality, right? So I can test in that way. Yes, just for testing purposes. It will not be in the production. Of course, eh, changing the variables all the time is not good because we need to test the real configuration sometimes. But for the sake of automation, again, we can configure and customize our environment to support the testing activities. So the key point, the proposal here is now we are discussing the third dimension. Again, again, we will highlight the communication skills. We need a close relationship with the development teams. If we need something, any additional interface, I can request from them, like, okay, I know this will not be used in production environment, but just for my testing purposes, please give me another interface so that I can gather, collect all the information I need because otherwise I cannot conduct my test phases. So we can perform this kind of additional requests to make our test environment more robust and more supporting the testability issues. Let's move on. Another interesting structure of the product, right? What if we are testing some hardware? Are there any people testing hardware? Maybe you can just put some comments in the chat. But this is again another real story for me. I was working for a robotics company in Japan, and I was testing the AMRs, the autonomous mobile robots. So they were moving around. So let's think about this. How can I automate the test cases? Like there are some functionalities. If there's an obstacle in front of the robot, it should stop. So there's an emergency stop feature. Or like if the robot has a tilt, then again it should trigger the emergency stop. So these there are these kind of functionalities. So how can I test these specifications or the requirements? Of course, if I do the manual testing, I can do, right. I can just place an obstacle in front of the robot and I can observe if it is stopping or not. But if I try to do this in an automated way, then probably I need some simulation environments. So now the proposal is what I will suggest is support your test automation environment with some simulation environments. If you have some hardware, so that you can generate all the signals coming from hardware modules. Most probably you will have some sensors or different detectors, and you can simulate the signals coming from those modules. Just send the relevant message in your queue, and your software modules, software components will collect those signals, those messages from the queues, and you can test your functionality. But this is again another challenge from what we can encounter in our real life examples, right? Because we are not always testing the software. Sometimes we are testing a web application, but sometimes it's an IoT device. Like probably you are wearing a smart watch, right? There is a software running inside, but that software is running in an operating system, in a interfacing or interacting with hardware modules, hardware components. So sometimes we need to test hardware as well on top of the software. One more product component, which might make things a little bit more challenging, which is AI, right? Of course, we would talk about AI. It's a hot topic. It's everywhere. Like whenever you are watching a movie on a platform, whenever you are reading some articles, whenever you are listening to music on any platform, you see several AI or ML, machine learning, or LLM, the large language models components, right? How do they work? Like, for example, if you watch some media or movies on a platform, then they suggest you some similar ones. You might be interested in these too. How do they know? Because they built a model on top of your patterns. They observe what kind of movies you are watching the most, and probably they are observing your rates, the ratings, and then they try to suggest some similar things you might be interested in. But looking from the functional testing perspective, how can I ensure the accuracy of these language models or the machine learning models? Because while developing the machine learning model, I can run several evaluation criteria. Like, uh, if you are interested in machine learning, probably you know the concept, but there is something called confusion matrix. So you can evaluate the accuracy of your model. Like you can say 90% it is giving me the correct results because you have some data which was already labeled as the expected data, and you observe the actual data coming from the machine learning, and you compare that, and you build a confusion matrix. So this is one way of doing that. But again, looking from the functional testing perspective, this time maybe not only running the automated test, but running some experiments can support our test automation. Because this time, on this regard, my suggestion would not be directly relevant to the automated test, but supporting automated test cases with some other types of testing. So this time, our motto will be automation is not a silver bullet. It cannot solve everything. You cannot cope with all the challenges with only automated testing. Sometimes you need the exploratory testing. Sometimes you need to run some experiments, some user surveys, so that you can collect some feedback from the people, from the users that are using the system, and you can get a feeling or understanding of how or the what the accuracy levels are. So moving on. Actually, we already discussed about running some different types of testing, right? So it is not only functional testing, but there are several non-functional aspects as well. For example, performance testing is a non-functional testing, right? There are several types of performance testing, like load testing, stress testing, longevity testing. So these are all non-functional testing types. Security testing is another one. And there are lots of different abilities like maintainability, recoverability, scalability, what else? Understandability, traceability, portability, lots of different abilities. So there are dozens of non-functional testing types. But let's, from the quality perspective, let's discuss especially the usability, right? Because what usability means is basically the user friendliness, how the users can use this product, how easily they can use the product. So I have some images on this slide. We can see, for example, there is this is again a real life example. Now I'm working for Indeed.com, which is a job seeking platform. So we can just query for some jobs. So I see some results on this slide, right? For example, I search for a manager jobs in Boston area, or I search for QA tester keyword in some other area, and I get the results. Do you already see some usability issues on these results? And on the below example, there is a pop-up window when there is an error. There is a pop-up window, including that there is an error. Are there any usability issues on these examples? You can put some comments in the chat. I will wait a bit for people to interact because I wanted to make it more interactive, and I want people to be more engaged. So I already see one. Error is not clear. Very good. Anything else? A lot of people approve. Error thrown is not intuitive. Yes, correct. Error. It's very vague, right? It's not clear. Error. But what kind of error? Like, what did I do wrong? Like, unknown error. So, so what should I do? Right? As a user, I have to somehow fix this situation. User doesn't know what to do exactly. It's not a good user experience. Exactly. People will have a lot of complaints after having this. Suppose you are developing this product and giving to users, and if they see such kind of error, what will they think? They think that you are not building a very high quality product, right? So usability is very directly relevant to the quality. Again, quality is not only the functionality, but it is also the non-functional aspects. And in the upper example, we can see two new jobs after the manager query, right? Actually, it seems like minus two, right? Actually, the dash is a separator, a divisor between the query and the result count, but dash is very close to the result. So it looks like minus two. Actually, it is two because how can the result be minus two, right? It doesn't make sense. But even these kind of minor issues, we might think from the functionality perspective, it is not a major error. It is probably a minor in terms of functionality. But again, in terms of quality, it might be very important for the users, for the end users, which are directly interacting with the system and the product that we are developing. So again, the motto is same. Test automation is very important, but test automation itself will not suffice for everything. This is why we are always discussing if the robots can replace our jobs, right? What do you think? Will we lose our jobs to the robots? I mean, if I ask something to ChatGPT, I'm having some code which looks really great, which looks really amazing. The code quality is very high, the naming, the other conventions, everything is great, and it's very efficient. The time complex, the space complex, everything is there. Okay, but I see a lot of response. Almost all the responses are no. Why do we think like that? Because again, it is not only coding, right? Okay, robots, machines can develop some code, but how can you understand this error code is understandable or clear or not? Robots or machines will not have this intuition. They don't have feeling, right? So as a user, as a human, I have feeling. So when I see this error message, I have a feeling that the quality is not as I expect. How robots would do that? They could develop some code and they could ensure the pop-up window is there. They can assert that. But how about the text inside? Is it understandable? Is it helpful? Is it clear? These kind of things requires the manual testing and an eye, a perspective of a human. This is why we are saying robots will not replace our jobs, right? We can of course get a lot of help from them, a lot from them, like to review our code, to develop our code, or ask some other kind of queries. So we can ask a lot of help from them. But eventually, we are needed over there as the final approver, the human, the developers, the testers, the QA people, the quality people are there to perform the final verifications. Yes, they don't have the perception. Correct. All right. One more aspect, very similar one, is a recoverability. Like everything goes very well, but what happens if some parts of the system is down? What happens? This is, as we know, is another kind of non-functional testing, which is called as chaos testing, right? Because intentionally we make some parts of the system down and observe how the whole system can manage this situation. This is chaos testing. Again, we intentionally put some services down and observe the rest of the system. Probably it might buffer the data, and when everything is up and running again, it can properly continue the communication. This is one way, but depending on the solution, there might be several alternatives. But the key point here is even if we have this kind of situations, Because nowadays we have several dependencies, right? It is not only the product that we are developing. Sometimes we are using cloud services. What happens is the cloud platform is down, we are using. Sometimes it's not only our product, but also our dependencies. So we have to mind about this kind of non-functional aspects. So I highlighted only two of them, but again, as I listed in the beginning, there are several different non-functional aspects. So we are closing to the end. Now we will talk about the testing challenges. Some challenges stem from not from the environments, not from the product, not from the non-functional aspects, but from testing itself. We need some different efforts to allocate on different phases of the software testing lifecycle. You know, the software testing lifecycles starts with requirement analysis, right? And then we develop, design our test cases, and then we implement, and we execute, and finally we maintain. So design, execute can be either manual or automated ways, and after executing, collect the results and maintain. If you have any, if you find any bugs, report them. If you find any other observations, report them. So this is what we are supposed to do as the quality gate keepers. So in this life cycle, after we design our test cases, the first thing is the executing our test cases. So if we are doing the test automation, first of all we need to implement the code, right, and then we can execute. But even before starting the implementation, sometimes we uh, have to prepare our environments. So one more real life example, maybe it will be much more clear to explain what I'm talking about. So, in one of the projects that I was working, I had to verify a functionality which was contacting to different tenants. So, all tenants have different emails. So, the system was supposed to send some emails to contact with different tenants. So, how can I test this? I can create a tenant with an email account and I can trigger this function and see if the email is there or not. So how can I do that is I can log in into the email account and see if the email is there or not. So once I can do that, but the challenge starts when I try to automate this test case and run a lot of times, not only once, but hundreds, thousands of times. So which means I need some physical email accounts because the email account should exist so that the email should arrive. And for logging in, I need lots of different data and actually the physical interaction as well. Because to be able to log into the email account, sometimes I have to pass some verification code. So it is not feasible to try to manage thousands of email accounts. But what I did is I set up an email relay, which was just collecting the different emails which are supposed to be sent to individual accounts and collect each of them and forward to only single account. So this relay was forwarding all emails to a single account so that if I have only one account which on which I have the control, I don't have to log into thousands of different accounts. It would be easier to automate my test cases with this relay. But what is the challenge here? To be able to set up this relay, I had to use several cloud services. By the time it was one of them, but you can use any. But the thing here is, or the plan that we have to do is considering all these kind of preparation steps. It is not only just start coding and complete our coding, but sometimes we need to again prepare our test execution environment or the test implementation environment. So please consider this, take this into account. Otherwise, you might have some wrong plannings. You, for example, plan for testing activities for 2 weeks, but in the midway you will realize there are some effort that you have to reserve for preparing the environment, and you will see that 2 weeks are already gone even without starting the coding. So this is the preparation that we need sometimes, even before starting the implementation. How about the implementation itself? Let's suppose everything is ready. Okay, I have the environment and I'll start coding. As we briefly discussed at the very beginning of the slide, it is sometimes annoying, right? Especially the UI testing. How many of you are doing UI testing? Can I see in the comments, in the chat? Any people doing UI testing, UI automation? All right. Maybe not too many. Okay. Okay. There are some people. All right. So I'm not sure if it is only me. Okay. There are a lot of people. I don't know if it is only me, but UI testing is more annoying than the API testing, at least for me personally. Why? Because it might be more easily broken, right? If the developers change the layout, it is just broken. Or even without any change, sometimes I have some strange errors, like my test tool is finding the elements, and sometimes the elements suddenly detached from the page. Yes, elements, right? Yes. I see some people are doing the manual testing. So let me briefly explain how we automate UI testing. So just for the people who don't know how it works in the background. So normally, if we do the manual testing, we interact with the elements, right? If there's a button, we click. If there's a text field, we put some text or user input. So the automation does the same. So it clicks the button, but where is the button? At which coordinates the cursor should click? So in the old tools, we were literally finding the coordinates, the pixels. But when we resized the window, it was broken. So this was the very old approach. Nowadays, the modern testing tools are not finding the elements based on their the coordinates, but based on their DOM attributes. Like there are different attributes we can use. It might be the X path or the CSS path or lots of different attributes. But this is the main cause for, or the root reason for the failures. If they change the layout, all the paths will be broken, they will change. So what we can do is, maybe instead of doing this, exactly, I see the last comment, use some IDs. Okay, but most of the time we will not find any IDs, right? Developers use just will not set properly the IDs, so there might be some IDs, but there might be dynamic IDs, so they will still not work. So what we can do, we can introduce some test IDs to the components. So even if the layout changes, it will be still there. So please try to encourage your teams to use it. So again and again, I'm repeating myself a lot of times, but believe me, this is very important. As the QA team, we need good communication skills. We need good relations, close relations with the developer teams. If you realize that UI tests are broken very frequently, please talk to them. I either can do, either the developers or the testers. If you have the permission to write on the code, you can do. Otherwise, if you don't have the permission to write on the repository, then you can ask developers to do. Whenever they are introducing some new components or elements, at least the ones which are interacted by the users, they can encourage them to introduce some test IDs. So yes, I'm not sure. It depends, but we might say the primary responsible for that should be the devs. But again, it depends on the structure of your teams. So, all right, let's move on. Getting close to the end of the talk, so we will discuss the last challenges. So, the first one of those last challenges is slowly running test cases. Do you know Mr. Bean? Who is the person on this slide? Yeah, right. It is very funny. So on this example, he was waiting for a car, I guess, waiting on a road, and no one comes, right? So he was waiting for a really long time. Sometimes this is what I feel when I'm waiting for the pipeline to pass, because I start. I'm yes, this is Mr. Prince. So I'm starting a pipeline. It is very crucial. It might be a bug fix. It might be a hot fix. So it is important to run as fast as possible. It means the production environment, we are waiting for fix to be there as soon as possible, as fast as possible. But if the tests are very slow, we are waiting like Mr. Bean, waiting a lot, and the tests are still running. So this is annoying, right? So what we can do? What is the solution for this? Maybe we can divide our set into subsets and run them in parallel. Yes, exactly. Multi-threading or parallel testing. Yes. So if you are using most of the modern E2E test tools like Playwright, Cypress, they are automatically supporting this. You can just enable over the configuration. Even in Selenium, you can configure your configuration file, and you can uh, run your test in parallel. Yes, it's divide and conquer, correct. But the challenge here is sometimes some people are consulting me. They are saying that I cannot divide into subsets. Why? Because they have dependency. Please, please develop your test cases independent from each other. If you have some dependency issues, like to be able to run a test case, first you have to run another test case because it is updating some values, and the next test is pulling those kind of values. Then there is a dependency. So please design in another way. Your test cases should not wait for another test case. If that is the case, you will not be able to split your test cases into different subsets, and you will not do a lot of parallel suites. So mocking might be a solution depending on the level you are doing. Like if you are doing unit testing, you can of course do the mocking, but if you are doing end-to-end level testing, it's advised not to mock a lot. You can still do, but as much as possible, try to use the real objects in the system testing. But while designing the flow of your test cases, please try to develop them independent from each other. And code quality. What do we see on this image? There is a Mona Lisa. Actually, there are two Mona Lisas, right? There is some replicas. Exactly, there are two. What does it mean? Replica means a duplicate. Yes, repetitions, duplications, replicas. Please try to eliminate them. Why should we eliminate them? Because let's suppose I have a login algorithm. In all the test spec files, have this login code. And let's suppose they change the login approach. It's not a password anymore, but it is just attaching a token to our queries. So what I'll do, I will change all my spec files, right? But what if I had a login method in some other class, maybe from a helper class? In that case, I won't have to change anything on the spec files. Spec files are just calling the login file, login class, login function, whatever. And if I change the login function itself, all the spec files will be reflecting this change. So eliminating the duplication will help me a lot to improve the maintainability. Exactly. Reusability is a very good keyword. Yes. Thanks. Let's move on. I think this is the last challenge that I will go over. We discussed a lot, right? There are several different challenges in terms of test automation. It is not easy. While we are doing the test automation, we have to think a lot of different perspectives. We have to take into consideration a lot of different dimensions. So this is another one. Sometimes I execute my test cases and it fails. And when I rerun, it doesn't fail anymore. So reproducing the bugs is not easy. So what I do, I collect a lot of evidences during the execution, right? It might be flaky. It's the failure might stem from the test itself, but it might be an intermittent issue too. Even though your test is not flaky, it might be just a intermittent issue stemming from the momentary configuration or the environmental variables. By the time it was failing, but if I run again with some other inputs, then it doesn't run. It doesn't fail anymore. So there might be several different reasons for the reproduction issues, but if I collect several evidences, put all the logs, put all the screenshots, for example, so that you can understand by the time of the failure what was how the UI looked like, so you can understand. And in some tools, you can even collect the trace logs, so you can play almost as a video. And of course, it's a trade off. Like if you collect everything, it might be a little bit uh, it might not be not the best for in terms of the memory. But whenever you need this, please try to collect all the evidences. So rerunning the test cases is a way of dealing with failures. But again, it doesn't solve this problem, right? Because if it failed once, and if you rerun the failing test cases, if it is not there anymore, it doesn't mean that it is totally gone. If it happened once, if you rerun, and if it is not there anymore, please don't forget about it. If you forget, and if you say, okay, okay, it's not happening anymore, you might see it again in the future. Maybe not at that time, but when the same conditions hit again, then you can see them. So, of course, doing this for every single failure is not easy. Of course, you will not be doing this for every single failure. But please keep in mind, if there is a suspicious failure, please keep that in mind. I'm not saying you have to fix or find the reason, root cause, immediately, but at least put that in your watch list. Okay, don't forget about this. Put in your watch list and observe for a while. If you catch the failure again, then now you are sure it is happening sometimes, right, from time to time, and then you can focus even more and try to understand and find the root causes. So I think I'm done with all the challenges. So let's very quickly discuss what we went over and in which categories. So the first category was the challenges regarding the environments that we are working in. For example, if we are working in an agile environment, we have to cope with several frequent challenges, changes, or the updates, right? So uh, we have to build a good communication channel and a strong relation with the development teams and the product teams to be aware of what is being done. If you are working very far away from each other, and if you don't have any strong bonds, you will have silos. You will not be up to date. They will plan some new developments, some implementations, and you will not be aware. And your test cases will be outdated. Next was the test environment, not our working environment, but the testing environment, right? So the coping with the instabilities or the inconsistencies. It might stem from the A/B testing activities or some other intermittent issues. So the proposal was developing some robust tests, which are supporting all possible potential response types. Then we discussed about some uh, challenges stemming from the structure of the product. For example, if there are some testability issues, or if there are some different components like the hardware parts or the subsystems, or the AI or machine learning components or the systems. What can we do? Again, for the testable issues, the key point was again building a good communication channel with the development team to require to ask for some additional interfaces just for testing purposes, just to ease your work, and for the hardware and AI, running some other testing types, not only the functional tests, but also some building some simulation environments and running some other user surveys and experiments. And similarly, we discussed some non-functional testings, right? Usability and recoverable tests. So the proposal was running some non-functional testings as well. And finally, we discussed challenges from the software testing lifecycle itself. So regarding the challenges for preparing the environment, for implementing the test code, executing the test cases, the slowly running test cases, and finally the code quality to maintain test cases, to remove duplication and build reusable test code, and finally reproduce the bugs that we might catch during the executions, for which the proposal was collecting evidences and upload them in our test management platforms, right? Police collect the logs, the screenshots, and automatically upload them to the test management uh, platforms. For example, if you are using Jira, if you are using TestLink, TestRail, they all have some APIs. You can upload the results, you can upload the evidences automatically. You don't have to do that manually. So this was the summary, and I tried to discuss them from different perspectives, from different categories. And for each problem, I tried to offer some different solutions and the proposals. So I hope it was useful and beneficial. I hope it helps with your daily work. And I will be happy to answer the questions. But again, I'm saying I'm open for the feedback and the questions. Feel free to connect me on LinkedIn or X, and feel free to reach out. So if we have any questions and if we have time for that, I would love to go over the questions. Thank you so much for listening to me.
So much, Masud, for your presentation. Guys, let's show our appreciation to Masud by clicking the reaction button. All right, I'm seeing a lot of emojis. Okay, so now we have some questions from you from the audience. So let's start with Sir Armando. What automation tools would you suggest for native Windows applications?
To be honest, I'm not very experienced with native Windows applications, but I know there are some tools doing that. There are some no-code platforms you can go with that, or you can use an alternative in which you can develop your own code. But since I'm not very experienced, I will not give any tool. Sorry for that.
All right, we do understand that. And for the next question is coming from Genevieve. What strategies can we employ to integrate test automation seamlessly into our continuous integration, continuous deployment, CI/CD pipeline?
So first of all, I recommend to put your test cases in the same repo, in the same pipeline where the code builds and the deployment is done. Because sometimes I'm seeing some examples from different people. They have a separate repository for the test cases. They are running across the platform in production on the or in the QA stage, but they are not in the same repository. So which means whenever the developers or anybody does something, a new implementation, a new functionality, they will not be running your test cases. So if you have your test cases in the same repository, they will already block the release if there is any failing test cases. So this is the first thing. And then when you have the test cases over there, There might be several slowly running test cases as we discussed throughout the talk. So what you can do is you can do a time analysis and try to understand which test case is running very slowly. Find that specific test case and try to fasten that by understanding the root cause. And finally, if it is not only the slowly running test cases, but also frequently failing test cases like the flaky tests, then again, the proposal is same. Try to understand why they are flaky. What is the root cause for the flakiness? It might be like dummy waits. For example, if you are waiting for 30 seconds, but the response time change varies. Sometimes it's 20 seconds, sometimes it's 40 seconds, right? So please avoid using dummy waits. Please use some smart polling algorithms. So this is just a very specific example, but depending on your case, please find the root cause and then try to improve that. So this will give you a seamless experience. Put your test cases, try to run them efficiently by removing the slowly running test cases and removing the flakiness.
All right, thank you for that. And we also have another one from Genev. What is the best practice when planning to have production automation testing?
Oh, this is a little bit tough because testing in production is a little bit dangerous, right? We can destroy, damage some data. So the best practice might be maybe performing your test case under a controlled configuration, like ensuring that you are not damaging the real data. You might generate some data for the testing purposes, but even they can damage the monitoring or change the monitoring statistics. So I advise to mark your testing in the production environment. So let the system know that this is a testing. This is not a flow from the end user. So the system should know that this flow, this user interaction was a test activity. Somehow let the system know. Somehow mark it, and then you can separate those data from the real production data.
All right, I hope that answers your question, Genev. And another one from Diane. Okay, from Louis. How do you handle tech debt? When do you decide it's time to stop managing the old technology and move on to something newer?
Technical debt is always there, but in some extent, right? It's less or it's more, it depends. But yes, as the question asks, when to stop, when to decide, when it is time to stop the new development activities. So it depends. Like you have to do a prioritization. You have to understand which tasks waiting in the technical debt backlog is critical, is major, and is even affecting the other tasks. Like if there are some tasks, unless they are solved, they are affecting the other, they are influencing the other tasks. If you have such kind of cases, I would suggest to prioritize them. So it depends on the criticality and the severity of those tasks, I would say.
And we also have another one from Rox. Which open source frameworks and tools would you recommend for test automation?
It depends on your product and the testing type. Like if you are doing UI testing, I would suggest Playwright is one of the very popular ones. It is mostly free. There are some paid features, but mostly free. And it is not the only one. There are different alternatives. Cypress is another one. You can use Selenium as well, but in Selenium there's more coding compared to Playwright and Cypress. And if you are using API, you can just use Postman, or if you are developing the code, you can use different libraries for performing your API queries.
All right, and we also have another one question coming from someone anonymous. How can teams effectively manage and maintain their test automation suites to prevent them from becoming outdated or brittle over time?
Keep yourself up to date with by talking a lot with the development team, talking a lot with the product team. So the key here is getting involved in the early stage. Like if development team is developing a lot and at the end of the cycle, if they are letting you know what they developed, it's too late. You should be involved when they start planning, when they start discussing. So early QA involvement is the proposal to cope with this challenge.
All right. So another one from Miss Diane. What future trends do you see in test automation and how should we prepare for them?
I think again, machine learning AI is everywhere. Everyone is somehow spending time and efforts on that. So it seems like this will be one of the future trends. Actually, it's not a future trend anymore. It's already in place. But I guess it will be even more. Like when we design our test cases, when we implement our test code, when we try to fix the test failures, AI can help in each stage. So if we improve our skills to use AI, we can do everything way faster.
All right. So for the last question, it will be coming from someone anonymous again. How can teams handle flaky tests in their automation suite and what are some real-world examples of overcoming this issue?
Again, it depends. Like most of the time, flakiness is stemming from elements being not found. I'm giving a very common example, but again, it depends on your case. So please analyze, please to do a root cause analysis and try to understand the reason. But I will give you just one example. So you are waiting a page to load, and you are trying to interact with the elements, right? Sometimes the page loads slowly due to network traffic or some other reasons. So you try to click a button, but button is not there, so the test fails. If the network is not crowded and there's no traffic, the page loads and you can click. So the test passes. But if there is a load in the network, if there is a traffic, then the test fails. Why? Because you wait for 10 seconds and after 10 seconds, page is still loading. The button is not there. So what did you do wrong? You add 10 seconds, right? How do you know it will be loaded in 10 seconds? Maybe it is 20 seconds. So please avoid using dummy weights. We call them as dummy or the magical numbers. Like why 10? How did you choose 10? So instead, do a polling. Like every 2 seconds, check if the button is there. Whenever it's there, you don't have to wait anymore. So it's a smart polling algorithm. So you can use these kind of alternative ways.
All right. So thank you, Masud, for answering the question. So now, in case you guys still have questions, please feel free to chat with our speaker on Ermit. And that's all the time we have for this session, guys. If you enjoyed this session, please give your rating and share your feedback about our speaker. You'll find the link in the chat box. So again, let's thank our speaker for let's give him our clapping emojis, our heart emojis. So yeah, I see a lot of emojis. And so
Thank you.
please exit this session and click on to the next or grab your lunch while we wait. So bye guys. Bye.